Hello and welcome to the Spark and Heal podcast. This is a podcast from a breast cancer survivor to other breast cancer survivors. I'm interviewing other women who have gone through breast cancer treatment and trying to understand their emotional state, their journey, and hopefully this is going to help some of you also if you're going through treatment. So today I'm talking to Kama. Hi.
Hello.
We have met quite some time ago here in Berlin. I organized this offline meetup, and that's how we met. And yeah, since we are in touch, and now we recently became neighbors.
Right. And I'm so grateful that you started, having those meetups and that we've met. It was such a big deal for me to meet other survivors in my neighborhood in a place that I just moved to.
Why was it important for you?
So I remember I traveled home to visit my family, and my mom told me she thinks it's important that I meet other people who went through what I've been through. I cannot remember now the context in which she said that, but when she said it, I think it was an extremely helpful advice. It's obvious to an extent, but I also felt like I had a lot to process, which all my friends who can be very supportive and understanding maybe don't have the fortunately, thankfully, the deep understanding of what it means to go through breast cancer. And then when I came back to Berlin, I just went on the Meetup website and looked right away for like breast cancer and seeing what comes up. And I think it was a complete coincidence because you just started those meetups. Like it
Yeah,
was
I
maybe
started
the
them
second.
literally 2 weeks before. Yeah.
Yes. So it was an incredible timing.
Hmm. Well, that's really cool. Like how timing is almost everything in certain situations, right?
Yes.
And so, have you tried to connect with other survivors before? What's your experience?
I lived in New York for many years before moving to Berlin, and that's where I was also diagnosed. And over there, I knew a few people, mostly from the community of people who have BRCA mutation. And some of them just live with the mutation, some of them were diagnosed. I had a chance to meet one person. Actually, she was a mutual friend who, once I found out I have the mutation, a friend told me, "Oh, I have another friend who has the mutation," and we became friends. We didn't see each other much because we both, just living a busy life. But I was diagnosed soon after we got in touch, and soon actually after I found I had the mutation. And then she ended up getting diagnosed 2 months after me, even though she's a few years older and she knew about her mutation for years. So it was an interesting, you know, timing,
Mm.
let's say, because again, we had something to connect over. And I think she has been my major point of contact, but we did have, I think, different circumstances as it always is. But other than that, here and there, I feel like it's not so hard, sadly, to run into people who had breast cancer. But I think it's different than actively seeking people who want to connect over this.
Mm. Yeah, well, we started on a heavy topic, but maybe we take a step back and you introduce yourself if you want to tell about yourself a little bit, just to give a little bit of understanding. What is your age? You don't need to give the exact age, but maybe the range, so somebody can also identify with. And a little bit about your mutation and um, just briefly as much as you want to describe.
Sure. So should I like dive into like what uh, uh, happened and so on? It's just a brief introduction, right?
You can just briefly introduce yourself and tell about your diagnosis, the time where you discovered you had breast cancer. And I know it already, but maybe you can tell about the journey from awareness to diagnosis.
Sure. Yes. So my name is Kama. I'm 33 years old. I first encountered the beginning of my breast cancer journey when I was 30, when I just turned 30. I found out that I have a BRCA1 mutation, and I started getting into a routine of checkups. And within my first checkup, which was a few months from awareness of my mutation, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. Actually, tomorrow I will be celebrating 3 years exactly for for my day of diagnosis.
Oh, wow, that's an important
Yes.
milestone. You probably remember all the dates when the day of your diagnosis and all like surgeries and treatments.
I think they're starting to get a little blurry. Like October 3rd was the day of my mastectomy. And a few days ago, someone mentioned October 3rd, and I was trying to remember why this date means something. And I was very happy to realize that it's not the first thing that comes to mind, but it took me a few seconds. But the day of diagnosis specifically, I kept on my calendar for
Hmm.
some reason, and I don't think I would have remembered if it wasn't there.
Okay. So how did it happen? So you said you went through the routine checkup.
Yes. So once I found out I had the mutation, I went to see a breast surgeon for a first consultation, and he mentioned that I should get on a routine of getting checked up every 6 months, once a mammogram and once an MRI. So I get one of each per year. And I did my mammogram very soon after I found I have the mutation, and everything was actually fine. And I really got used to the idea of having this mutation, and I didn't take it too seriously. Like, I wasn't too scared of it. I never had breast cancer in my life, like around me, so I wasn't aware of what it means so much. And I wasn't too concerned. And then I ended up getting my MRI a few months after this meeting with the surgeon. And from that MRI, everything was very quick. So I went to an MRI. 3 days later, was requested to come for a biopsy. I remember the biopsy was on a Friday morning, Monday morning, first thing. That was the day 3 years ago that they called me to let me know it's malignant. And then I was already getting into surgeries the following week.
Well, everything happened pretty fast, which is good. Uh, but on the like emotional level, all this situation, how did it develop? Like now, when you think back.
I remember it being a complete shock. The finding out the mutation was an initial shock. Like, I had some issue with the person who was supposed to tell me the results of the test. I took a bunch of genetic tests on the same day, and then they were trying to reach me, but I didn't answer. And I knew I was awaiting some kind of a message about my genetic being, but I didn't know what it was. So when I first got a hold on them and they told me, my first reaction was kind of a relief. Okay, now I know what kind of mutation I have. But the second after, it hit me. And at the time, of course, in retrospect, I knew nothing about it.
Hmm.
Not what it means. What does increased risk actually look like? What do the next years look like? But I was kind of in a state of a shock, which with the finding out about the mutation, it took me a few days, I think, to just get back to myself and understand that I still just need to gather a lot of information. With the diagnosis, that was another shock times 100. I think because I really didn't think that anything like this is going to happen anytime soon. Even though I saw a breast surgeon, I started my tests, I got the sense from him that I'm very young still and there's time, and maybe in a few years we will start considering a prophylactic mastectomy, but it wasn't anything that was urgent or on the table. And then I got my diagnosis, and one of the options immediately was to have a mastectomy right away. And I was so overwhelmed with emotions, stress. It was a week, like the first week after diagnosis. I remember I was so stressed. I was barely eating and sleeping, so I looked terrible. My brain wasn't functioning so well, and at the same time, I had to take in a lot of information to be able to make a decision, and the whole thing just put me in a very severe distress.
I don't know if this would be right to say, but it's good that you didn't have chemo.
I can
Because
imagine.
for me and for many other women whom I talked with, chemo was the worst part of the whole process.
Right.
But of course, like everything is quite terrible. I don't think it would be fair to compare because each individual woman has enough shock, and I cannot even imagine how I would feel if I knew about this mutation and how I would take this. When you need to do like double mastectomy, and then you have another surgery sometime in the future, right?
Yes.
So how um, yeah, like okay, I started about chemo, but still, like that's quite a huge shock for the mind and also for the body. What happened with you when you had to take your decision pretty fast? How did you go about like preparing yourself mentally for this, and also finding the right doctor for the procedure?
Um, First of all, I would say that I felt very overwhelmed by everything. And I was told at the time that the most important thing is to take out the tumor that they found, make sure that I mean, to check if it's spread, right? To see if it's local or if they would have to do chemo. And that was a surgery that was very up to me if I wanted to do a lumpectomy and radiation and then decide what's next, or to go straight into a mastectomy more as like a prophylactic step. And I think one of my ways to handle this was to stick. I just wanted to take it one step at a time. Like a mastectomy was something that was so insane to me to contain at the moment, because it was just so beyond my world. Like I think this whole situation of being diagnosed with cancer for anybody is just you suddenly have to make decisions about things you never thought that will come knocking on your door, and it's as if the life just pushes a big basket to you and says like, here, deal with it. And it was too much for me, and I ended up doing like portioning the in retrospect, portioning the surgeries, because I didn't know what was going to happen. But I did a lumpectomy first,
Mm-hmm.
and there I found that it was still local, and I could have decided like what is the next step. And considering my risks, that's where they became more, valuable, because the cancer at the stage I had it, a woman who doesn't have a BRCA mutation could have had the surgery, probably do some radiation and keep it at that. But because I knew that most likely I will have cancer again, I continued into doing a full double mastectomy. But it was months later, so I do feel like I had time to get used to the idea. I was very lucky in that sense that things were, not in like immediate life or death situation. And I did a lot of shopping around for doctors, because once the tumor was out and I knew I'm out of like immediate danger zone, I can take a breath and at least feel like I'm going into surgery with the right surgeon. I have to say that talking about this now, 3 years later, feels a bit funny to me that I made such a big deal out of who's the surgeon going to be. But at the time, I remember like it felt like one of the most important decisions of my life. I felt like it has to be the one, right? Almost like finding a partner, or it has to be like, like I felt like I have to feel comfortable, of course, which is very important. But I think I took it very, very much more serious than, like, at the end of the day, it's a person who did the surgery, and you know that's it. But I
Well,
mean,
but
I understand
when you are,
exactly where I was coming from.
yeah, but when you are diagnosed with such a serious disease, illness, I don't know what would be the right, yeah, term to call it. Of course, it's very scary, and typically when we think about cancer, the first thing comes is like death. At least for me, and I pretty much think that most women also think about this, even though we know that breast cancer is the most researched cancer and has the highest survivorship. Well, still, it's a very scary disease. And I mean, this is another topic, how we have to deal with this in society. But when you're diagnosed with this and you need to go through surgeries and chemo and radiotherapy, you want to be in the hands of the person whom you can trust. You cannot just take the first choice, maybe, if you trust this person, but if you don't, it's your body, and it's even more than that. Because for me, I see it as a connection of physical, but also emotional and even spiritual. It's huge.
It is huge. And perhaps I am saying this now because I was very happy with my surgeon at the end of the day.
Mm.
I ended up with a surgeon that, it was really like a journey about cancer with him. But I was going through also so many like personal changes in my life before and after. And I think also the relationship I had with him was interesting. Before the mastectomy, I was very like, I was questioning everything he said. Like, I wanted to understand that. It was interesting to find this way of the survival mode I was in took out like a researcher out of me. Like, I had to ask all the questions and understand exactly what he means. And we sometimes had like like small conflicts that he would get a little irritated and just say like, well, this is what it's like, and I'm an expert at this. And I felt like so many things were spinning in my head. that I kind of had a hard time finding the balance. But I mean, it's also important to ask all the things, but I was kind of like having a hard time letting go and let someone else who I chose like lead the way. And we had a very special moment on actually the day of the surgery. I think I was the first surgery of the morning. It was very early. And he came into the room and he seemed a bit like like a stiff. And I just held his hand and told him, I just want you to know that I trust you. And things just immediately changed between us that moment. He told me like, thank you so much for saying that. And we hugged. And from that point on, he has been like a major um point of contact for me for everything that happened after. Like, I was looking forward for my follow-ups. And because he's seen me in like various times from that moment, a month after, a year after, 2 years after, each time I came in a very different step of the process, and it's been a very emotional thing to have this like bond with him. I think I even have like a photo with him, I think from the last time I saw him, that like I like to keep. So yes, it became like a very meaningful connection.
This is very special because indeed it's like your, I don't know, I treat my surgeon like my godmother in a way.
Wow. I can completely understand. Yes.
It's like the person for me, like both my onco and my surgeon, they were the like the people who saved me, saved my life.
And it's so special to be in a job that like you on a daily basis meet people that are being thrown into this new territory, and they are scared and they are confused and they're lacking information. And it takes a lot to do this with kindness and empathy and lead the way, and also help you make a very like see what is the good solution for you and what fits you, and be attentive. It's such a hard
Right.
job.
Yeah, so you not only do you need to be a specialist in your field, but you also need to be a psychologist, and you also have empathy, and you also are a human being, so you're also allowed to have your mood, which may not fit yours on the day when you talk. It's very, and literally, their patient's life depends on them.
Literally.
So there is a lot of pressure on these people, I feel.
Definitely.
Yeah, but so you were happy with the surgery, how it went, and yeah, I imagine that.
Yes, I was happy. The day of surgery, it's funny that you used the word godmother, because I also the day of the surgery, I felt it was like a very, I don't have the word for it. Like I remember walking into the surgery room, and the breast surgeon was there, and the doctor I've been talking about until now was actually my plastic surgeon. That's the one I've had the connection with. The breast surgeon was a bit more like doing her job, coming in and out. I didn't see her as much, but she was very kind as well. And I remember walking into the room, to the stage, at surgery, and it was so bright, and there were so many women around me, and like taking me into this bed, and like everything. They put a blanket on me, so it was freezing out, but suddenly I was so warm and I felt so taken care of. And there is an element of a birth here. Like everybody who I've been talking to, I'm sure you have the same experience, is saying that it's a life-changing experience, and it's such a great moment of like before and after, and the people who are with you in this time, they matter. um and yes, for the surgery itself, I ended up being very happy with my reconstruction, as much as I could have been. I did not know what to expect. I was super terrified of what am I gonna feel when I'm gonna see it after. What is it gonna feel like? That is something I'm still figuring out what it feels like and learning, and it's changing often. And yes, I think it's going to be a forever process, but I'm very happy with, like, bodily speaking, I'm very happy with the outcome.
Hmm. Speaking of surgeries, so you had your double mastectomy, but you also face another surgery in the future, sometime in the future. And this is another big deal. So, how do you feel about this?
Right. So BRCA mutations, both BRCA1 and BRCA2, also increase risk for ovarian cancer, which is a bit of a another beast because there's no early detection for ovarian cancer the same way we know it in breast cancer. And so the general recommendation for patients is to remove their ovaries. It's a very, I mean, it's a very deadly cancer. Like the chances of survival once it has been diagnosed, because normally it's diagnosed at late stages. So many people die from it, and it's a it's very hard for me to. I find it's very hard for me to talk about it in the day to day because it's looming. It's like kind of something that is hovering over me, and for many extents, I feel like I'm scared of it more than. I mean, the mastectomy is over, so I'm not scared of it anymore. But it's a different kind of fear. A, because I already have all this awareness and I know what it's like to go through a body change. But this is a change that is less maybe physical on the appearance, and it's a big hormonal change. You know, removing your ovaries sends one into menopause. I feel very overwhelmed whenever it comes to mind, and I think about it pretty often. Um, it changes a lot of um, the plans I had for my life in terms of what am I going to do about family planning. That's the main thing, actually. But I now when we're talking about surgeons, I can really only hope to find someone that will serve me in the same way that my breast surgeon and plastic surgeons have, because at this moment, like, not I'm still too young to go through this process. There's like an age range that you can go through it. So it's not something like I'm actively working towards, but so it's very scary to not know who's gonna be with me in it, and it feels from this point very lonely.
Hmm. And it's definitely not the topic you want to think in early 30s. Like you said,
Definitely
you have
not.
different plans for your life, and you you don't want to because it seems like also there is a lot of pressure about that, about family planning. You have to decide, and like that you cannot stay, like you cannot push this surgery forever, and that you have this like corridor where you have to, if you want to have a child, and then to have surgery. It's just too much. And
Definitely. It's a lot.
unfortunately, that's the reality for you. How are you keeping yourself like grounded with this whole situation and knowledge of this?
It's been very tough, and you're completely right that definitely not something you want to think about in your early 30s, which is anyway a time a bit of a stress in the field of birth and so on. I think often when I talk with people about this kind of pressure and I don't know my situation, they say, well, it's fine, you're still young. People today are giving birth at much later ages, in your 40s and so on. And then I know that it's like a nice thought, but it's a bit more problematic to me to think
Mhm.
about late age um, birth and labor and so on. I hoped that I would be able, as much as possible, to not think about it while I don't have to think about it. I know people who are claiming that, in a few years there're going to be advancement in cancer research, advancement in genetics management, and of course we cannot know. I don't have much to do about it, so it's mostly about keeping my peace of mind around understanding that I have a big change that I'm going to face somewhere in my late 30s, early 40s, and it's a bit out of my control at the moment. And when the time comes, that will be the time to gather the data according to what's current to that moment.
Hmm. Okay, so let's go back to the first surgery. And you mentioned that, yes, you mentioned about body change. I know that this is another event that influences women quite a lot. First is to know the diagnosis, and the second, to have mastectomy. Some women can have reconstructions, other women can't. But even with lumpectomy, even when it's just like a little piece of your breast altered, it's still like huge. It's a part of your body which is now removed, and you have to get used to this new body. How was this whole process for you to um, realize that you need to have both breast removed and to live with the surgery since?
I'm trying to think what I want to talk about. You're asking in the direction of like breastfeeding and so on.
Everything actually, which because this is so huge. Like I can clearly say about myself that um, for me, I didn't realize how big deal it was for me in terms of my femininity, because I was feminine despite that. That's how I thought. But from the moment I had mastectomy, it hit me how strongly it was connected to my identity as a woman, and how much I also relied on breast in terms of sexual pleasure. This is quite erogenous zone for me and for many other women, and it was quite a big hit in a negative sense. It took me quite some time to accept how my body looked like and felt like. I think I'm still a little bit kind of in the end of this process. I have accepted it. I have decided to accept it and to say that yes, my body is beautiful, but it was quite tricky. 18 months for me to go this road, to try different like techniques of accepting it, different different readings, different thoughts that went through my head. And I didn't have to choose to become a mother or not, because I am child free. I never wanted to have children. But just knowing about this acceptance part, I can only imagine how hard it is to know that if you consider having children, having family, that this is an extra layer. So my question goes about these two levels of mastectomy, as a part of you as a woman, a human, as a part of your identity, and then as a part of you as a mother.
Yeah. I think there are few sides here for me. First of all, I would say that aesthetically, I feel like I I always thought I didn't have such nice breasts, and I ask forgiveness for the breast I was born with. They were lovely in their way, but they weren't so pretty to say. If you believe there's such thing as non-pretty breasts, but I had some issues with them. They're also much bigger than my reconstruction, which is something that weighed on me in life. You know, I also always used to wear like very expensive, like good bras just so I can like hold them in place and be comfortable. And from that point, I feel like the mastectomy uh, did some grace with me because it both got me smaller breasts, breasts that are a bit more perky and like, you know, uplifted. And I think their overall shape is nicer than the original one I had. So that is an element in which I feel like my current breast fits me better. Um, it took me a very long time to be able to sleep on my stomach with I have silicone implants. So that is one place that I wasn't happy with the new one, and I was kind of like getting still used to them. Now I fully can do everything, and so in a way I'm very connected to my breast as they are. That is one side of it. I think there is always the side of, you know, a part of me was taken away, which I think this is some kind of a pain that is just ingrained in me. I don't always have the words to describe it, and it was much more powerful closer to the surgery and straight out of it, but I know it's still there. It's just a shock to the body that I think has huge, like it impacted me mentally greatly. And I again I'm still like in the process of understanding what this pain is. It also changes. Um, like a lot of the times it just takes the form of sadness, right? Of something that was me and it's gone, of like losing something. And I think the loss of ability to breastfeed definitely falls into this element of my relationship to the mastectomy, because it's something like I know many women who have their breast intact and everything is okay are still might not be able to breastfeed. But this is not something I ever imagined not even having the option to do. I always consider myself someone who wants to have children, and I didn't have any yet when I was diagnosed. And I I'm actually shocked to remember this, but one of the first things I asked my doctor when he called to let me know that I have cancer was that I asked if like I suddenly had I thought, what if I get pregnant right now and just breastfeed a child for a few months and only then have like deal with the breast cancer, which of course it's a very naive thought of someone who doesn't know anything about breast cancer. But you know, I was basically suggesting to hold on from any treatment for 2 years and and then continuing. But I think this reaction shows me how much it was something that was on my mind that I have hoped to be able
Yeah.
to provide. And it's a very sensitive point, I think, with friends now who around me, like all my friends are having children, and it's both the having children itself, but the breastfeeding is an element on top of it. Um, I, of course, am very happy to anyone who can breastfeed, but I think it's a bit triggering to me in a way that it just meets me in a very painful spot.
Yeah.
Um, and then other thoughts that I just don't know. For example, I I I don't know if you felt this with you had implants for some time, right?
I had an implant, and then I had radiotherapy, which caused fibrosis. And so I had to go through deep flap reconstruction. So I had 2 reconstructions. Yeah.
Wow. So in the era with the implant, I don't know if you remember, but it's very cold.
Yes, I
The
didn't like it. And it was very
Yes.
hard and cold. Yeah.
It's cold and it stays cold for quite some time. If you go into the pool or something and you come out, it's like an iceberg. And I'm thinking about, like, holding a baby to your chest and you're freezing cold.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's something I've never looked into it. I don't know if it's something women have solutions for or talk about at all. But it's just all kinds of elements that are like sad for me to think about. And in general, I find that breasts just it became a bit of a sensitive topic to me in any kind of conversation. And it's an interesting kind of conflict to me that from the one hand, I am happy with the result and I'm happy with what breast cancer brought into my life, to be honest. I think it created many major changes for the good in my personality, in my I don't know, perspective. But at the same time, it's somehow remains like something I'm a bit uncomfortable if people start like bringing up, I don't know, boob conversations for any reason. I'm like it's a bit yeah, it's a bit difficult.
What is difficult for me, and yeah, it was and it still is, to hear stories about breast augmentation,
Uh,
especially since I had to deal with this and I went through this twice. Well, not augmentation, but like reconstruction. I cannot just imagine why a person would do this uh, just like this because they are unhappy with their breast, which is usually, I mean, I can understand that sometimes, yes, there are cases when this is necessary, but a lot of the situations it's just like vanity and it just doesn't fit my worldview, this whole
yes.
thing.
Yes, and I think the context of these surgeries makes a huge difference. I recently started therapy with a new therapist who is transgender. So he actually went through a mastectomy as part of their transition,
Mm,
which is extremely interesting because I feel so comfortable that I can talk to my therapist about details of my mastectomy, about the drains and like elements of it. Of course, he didn't have a reconstruction, so it was a flat mastectomy. But it's like we can connect over the details of the process, but the context, of course, like makes a huge difference in the impression of this. But I would say that he also said that this element of losing part of your body was there. It's something that is shocking, I think, no matter what.
yeah.
Which doesn't exist in breast augmentation, so it's a bit different. But um, yeah,
Yeah, but in the breast augmentation, there is also a risk of hitting nerves and not getting the sensation, like losing sensation completely. And like, I was asking myself, is it really worth it? But then again, it's not my decision to take. Um, but actually, it was. I'm really happy to hear the story about your breast, that you are rather satisfied with them. And this negative situation turned out to something quite positive, that you see them as a beautiful, improved kind of part of your body. So that's really cool. But from this, I wanted to transition a little bit about your strategy with coping, strategies of coping with stress. We want it or not, but from the moment we get the diagnosis, we have different levels of stress. We deal with it differently. And also we are not always have people supporting people around us. I met with several women who did not necessarily have the safety network, even though they had families, but these families were not well fitted to support them. So I wanted to ask, were there methods, like tools that you use to soothe yourself, to calm your stress down and to go through the situation? And if you still continue using this method?
So luckily, I didn't have to deal with this kind of stress any other time in life, and it was quite surprising to me to find out. And this is also in retrospect, because I think at the moment I was just doing whatever felt right, and my brain was a bit shut off for a few months. But now looking back at the time, I I had all this like stress and pressure, and I directed it into a lot of like activity that relates to it, meaning I was a nonstop reading. um like I bought a book of history of cancer research, like 500 pages, and I
Wow.
started reading it. And then I also started taking like classes, like there are a few online classes for breast cancer. I started looking in different groups and get myself very immersed and involved. I think in a way that, you know, it was a lot. It was a lot to take in, especially when you read about these theoretical things, but you also need to fit yourself into this like scale. Like I remember in the book they were talking about not ancient, like just, you know, they started doing mastectomies a long time ago, because it was, they could already see like tumors and so on, and there were like images of how they used to do mastectomies. I'm not gonna say the year because I can't remember, but they were like diagrams, like drawings of cutting it with all kinds of instruments. And I remember I saw it, and then I was thinking, I'm going to go into mastectomy. If I lived so and so years ago, this would have been my fate. And it was um terrifying. So to an extent, maybe it was a bit too much information, but something about reading, I think, helped me gain a feeling of control over the situation. And then I was living in the US at the time, and there I had to deal a lot with, like, you know, insurance things, and like making a ton of appointments and bureaucracy. And I was also holding on to that quite a lot. I think also as a way to feel in control. So I was like constantly on phone calls and asking questions, preparing questions for an appointment, leaving with questions from an appointment. Um, I think that was the first phase of, you know, first finding out and making all the decisions. Once I made the decision that I basically said that I would do a full mastectomy, which meant I didn't have to do radiation, because radiation was only relevant in case I would leave my breast tissue. And I knew I had a mastectomy. I think it was scheduled for 3 months ahead. That was a different level of stress, because the stress kind of lived more as like an anxiety that was just undercover. And I did everything I can to distract myself from it, because I knew I decided, I knew I'm scared and stressed. And I just felt like this is a time to just, you know, hold your breath and let time pass, and feel all the feels after I'm on the other side of it. And I actually remember that summer as a very fun summer, because I had a calendar full of, like, you know, dates in restaurants and shows, and just meeting with friends, and I went to the amusement park and to the beach and travels and did all of those things. And then slowly, when the date came closer, it really felt like a ceremony. Like my mother arrived and she was with me for the surgery and for the days after. We actually did a ceremony at home with a few of my close friends and my mom, and someone was like facilitating it. It was a very special day. That was the day before.
What did you do? What this ceremony entailed?
So, wow, it was it was a female rabbi who prepared like a ceremony that involved around like being around healing, around life and healing, and it had different phases. First of all, it felt very special. It felt like it's my wedding day or something, you know, because she came for me, and like my friends didn't really know what they were coming for to, and I also didn't know what she was preparing. But there were moments that we were like people were writing some blessings and read it to me. She prepared some things she wanted to read, but then there was a moment that I was kind of like standing under a canopy that my friends were holding, and I'm sure I wrote about it, but I can't remember now what exactly she was saying. But she was basically blessing me for this big step, for this new life,
Yeah.
and it was huge. It was such a special, it was a beautiful moment. And I think it also was very fitting because it did feel, as I said, like you know, a new life.
Yeah, wow. That's like I had shivers and goosebumps.
Yes, I think now remembering it, I kind of forgot about it for a while, but I think it was very meaningful to make this time special. Um, yes, I also went to get drawn. So basically, I was nude modeling, and so I have a drawing of me with my body as it was. Yeah, so I guess now thinking about it in retrospect, I was pretty ceremonial about the whole thing, and I feel very grateful that I also had like the space for it, the space and time, and people around me also to go with it, to support me in making those events happen.
That's so beautiful. Did you have any ceremony after you've done with surgeries and felt kind of like good to move and yeah, be in the world?
You know, I think I haven't, or not formal ones. I think there were small internal ceremonies, like
Mhm.
the first time I showered in the public shower of like a swimming pool, right? So it's the first time I'm taking my clothes off, or the first time a partner who's never seen you before seeing you with your new breast. So I think there were moments, but there wasn't anything formal.
Mhm. And so it leads me to, I don't know if this is the final question or one of the final questions, but um, who is Kamal before and after breast cancer?
Hmm. I think the Kama after cancer is definitely one who has more confidence to believe she can handle what life brings. That, you know, I will have challenge being thrown at me, and I feel like I will have um the ability to wing it, or to see what it's about, to learn about it, to make the right decisions. And I think that's something the way I remember myself from beforehand, I would imagine myself feeling like there's no way I would be able to deal with something like this, like feeling like I'm not strong enough. And here I am on the other side, knowing for fact that I can. And it's a very empowering thing. And I think it's also, I also feel just more humble towards the world, and understanding that people go through difficult things at different moments, and you never know what it is. And I'm incredibly grateful for people who were kind to me during that time and patient with me. And it's a huge drive to want to do that for others, be it someone who's going through what I went through, and I can, give her what people gave me at the time, the encouragement, or just showing her what it looks like, or helping in any possible way, and be it any other challenge, because it was definitely, I think, the biggest challenge I've experienced today.
Hmm. Was it something during this whole period that, like you mentioned rituals, but maybe was it some sort of music or a book or a podcast that kept you connected with your inner self or with the world?
Good
Or maybe
question.
some other thing, I don't know, maybe you did something, drawing or writing, that that kind of grounded you.
I think I was journaling a lot at the time. There wasn't anything specific, and I do remember it as a time of a bit being, floating in the air, living in a parallel universe. The book I bought for like the cancer history book, I cannot remember the quote, but they talk there about being sick is like being a citizen of another country.
Oh,
It's like
this
a
is Susan
different writing.
Sontag.
Yes.
This is Susan.
And
I'm reading actually this book right now.
wow, okay. And it really felt this way. It was like it was a different life, a different world, and I think it was mostly people around me who kept me going, and I was very fortunate to be surrounded with a lot of warmth and presence. And I took a lot of small signs along the way also as things that grounded me. When I was diagnosed, two doves landed on my balcony, and they stayed there for a few days, and I felt like it was to me a sign that like there's something that is like, watching over me. So small things like that.
This is a beautiful sign. And so, what keeps you busy and happy these days?
Wow, a lot. I feel like these days I'm very focused on trying to shift blockers that I've had in my life. For example, I always had an issue with my knee that prevented me from doing some kinds of sports, and I've been focusing a lot on strengthening it, and being like able to do everything, and like working out regularly. I didn't know how to ride bike until I was 30, and I just got like a new bike, and trying to, get as much experience as I can on it. I always wanted to draw more, and I am really like making sure I'm doing that. And I think it's a very special time of my life, of like appreciating life and seeing that it's time to bring, you know, the things that makes us us, and just do them. Not in like, I mean, it sounds very cliche, but I think it's very encouraging after you step out of a situation like this, and understanding that life is short and very limited, and like it's our responsibility to make ourselves happy and busy with things that make us happy.
It sounds really beautiful. And I can just add to that that I read in the books and I heard from other people about how valuable life is. And I knew this, like for sure. But after this experience, I think I grasped life a little bit more. And what you're talking about, I understand it more. And it's a little bit sad, I feel, and unfortunate that we have sometimes to go through big crisis in life, a serious illness, to really understand this, to transform. Like very often they call these experiences life transformative, right? So yeah, I feel it's a little bit of unfortunate, but on the other hand, I'm even glad for this experience for myself because of the choices, life choices and decisions that I'm making.
Same. And I even remember bringing it up with my surgeon. After a year or so, I told him, wow, I feel like I'm a very different person. And he told me that it's a very common thing. Definitely.
I will make sure to include the link of the book you were talking about in the comment section so people can check it. And if you remember of some other resources that were useful to you, I will also include them. I really appreciate your time. Thank you for connecting and sharing your story because it's very personal. It's not easy, but I really hope that somebody can connect to your story and find a light through the story and seeing your beautiful and smiling face, and get hope because there is hope. Yes, breast cancer is the most researched cancer in the world.
There is. Thank you so much for having me, Ina, and for being such a beam of hope for women everywhere.
Thank you. I wish you a wonderful evening and hopefully talk to you soon. And
Yes.
thank you for listening and watching. Bye bye.